This is Catalog and Cocktails. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Here's your hosts, Juan Sequeda and Tim Gasper.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Catalog and Cocktails. This is a weekly live hangout, an honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd and product guy at data.world, and joined by Juan.
Hello. I'm Juan Sequeda. I'm the principal scientist here at data.world. And always, it's Wednesday, middle of the day, middle of the week, and always glad to take a break and talk about data. And today we have a very special guest, my really good friend, and somebody who I admire and been following his work for so long and read his books, Dave McComb. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm kind of humbled by that introduction, but thank you.
Well, as we'll get into this stuff, I'll show everybody. Dave is an author of these two books, Software Wasteland and Data-Centric Revolution. And I think this should be mandatory reading by every single data professional in the world, period. If there's one book you need to go read, it's Software Wasteland. But before we get into that, a couple of just reminders, please. We're glad everybody is here. Remind you that give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Spotify. We really, really appreciate that. And also, we're very excited that we are partnering up with the folks at the Knowledge Graph Conference, which is going to take place this May 3 to May 6 virtually. They have 17 workshops and tutorials, including like one-on-one topics all the way to advanced topics for both the tech folks and business. Over 50 speakers, plenty of network events, and a lot of fun events. We have keynotes by Samak Degani and Lazo Barabasi. And we're going to have a special edition of Catalog and Cocktails over there. Well, I'm going to be moderating a data architecture panel with Samak Daini from ThoughtWorks, Teresa Tung from Accenture, Jay Yu from Intuit, and Mohammed Asser from McKinsey. So for everybody who's listening, you can get your own ticket at knowledgegraph.tech. And we have a special 10% discount code. So if you use CCKGC, CC for Catalog and Cocktails and KGC for Knowledge Graph Conference, CCKGC, get a 10% discount. Early bird closes next Monday. So just a quick reminder, we're really excited that we're partnering with the Knowledge Graph folks. So hey, before we get into the data, what are we drinking? What are we toasting for? Who wants to kick us off?
Well, unfortunately, it's still 3 o'clock in Mountain Time, so I'm drinking coffee.
Hey, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
I'm toasting the end of the pandemic. I think we're done.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Yeah. How about you, Tim?
I am switching from caffeine. I was drinking coffee about an hour ago to some blood orange soda with a little bit of rum.
Not bad. I discovered something new. I found this new whiskey called Agua Solo, which is a corn whiskey from Mexico. So I made myself Juan's Mexican old fashioned. So you have this Mexican whiskey and with agave, and I'm enjoying this stuff. So hey, cheers.
That sounds
the
good.
Pandemic is coming to an end. I know that for sure, right?
Cheers.
And then we have our funny question of the day here, debate. We're talking about, is it a data-centric revolution, a French revolution, American revolution, or the Beatles revolution? What is it?
I don't know. The French Revolution is a little dark, right? Like maybe Beatles, peace and love. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll go with Beatles. Heads are not going to roll.
Well, let's start off with the data revolution and the data-centric revolution in particular. So, Dave, honest, no BS. What the heck do you mean by a data-centric revolution? When you write the book and everything that you've been talking about, what the heck does this mean? Honest, no BS.
Yep. Well, it means that an enterprise has a single, simple, federatable model at its core, which is the complete opposite of what they currently have. Right now, most large enterprises have thousands of data models, each of which is complex. And that's, they spend all their time screwing around with the complexity, and it's not necessary. It is possible to have a single, simple, extensible model.
So that's it. Simple, single, extensible model.
Yep. That's it.
Is it that simple? So this is the thing. It's like it sounds too good to be true. is it like, can this be happen? Like, I mean, why aren't we there? It sounds very simple, but simple is always hard to get to.
Well, the catch is that it's not something you can buy, and it's not something that Gartner is going to hype because you can't buy it. and the other catch is it requires discipline. It requires discipline and a small group of people sticking with something for a long period of time. And that's kind of rare in business. But the people that have done that have succeeded. And it's that simple.
I see the value of the word revolution here, right? Change seems to be the central theme here.
Yep.
And it's definitely not going to happen overnight, and it's not something you buy. And it's a lot of it's a people and processes cultural shift, which is a lot of the things that we talk all the time, right? It's people and processes, not technology.
Yep.
So, okay, so let's dive into this more about what are the people and the processes. I mean, there has to be there is technology involved, right? It's not just technology.
Yeah.
So
right.
Let's dissect this a little bit, and let's go down to the technology part. So what are the technologies that are needed for the data-centric to be data-centric?
Yep. I explored in the book, there's a handful of people that have done this the hard way. We Standard & Poor's division called Market Intelligence built a very beautiful data-centric architecture, and all of their applications, everything is on a single model. It's not very simple in their case, but it is a single model that all functionality is implemented on. And it was with traditional technology. They did it all with the equivalent of, stone tools, relational databases and stuff like that.
So relational databases are stone tools here.
Yeah, exactly. Neolithic man used relational databases. We're in the Anthropocene now. But anyway, what is in 2 or 3 orders of magnitude simpler than that, your question about the technology, we think it's a 3-legged stool to do this easily and in your own lifetime. One is a knowledge graph. In order to have the flexibility that you want, get away from rigid structures. 2 is use semantics wisely. That's a lot of how do you get to the simplicity by being very rigorous about definitions and things just snap into place. And the third piece, we call it model-driven everything. So try to have somewhere north of 90% of your use cases with no application code. Because if you do that, the economics of delivering stuff just plummet. The quality goes up, the productivity goes up. And you can't quite do 100% of everything model-driven, but you can get a long way there.
All right, so this last point that you're making is I think is key, is right. Make everything model driven. Basically, let's make sure that we take out all the logic, all the knowledge outside of the code that gets lost and put that inside the model. Let's go back and talk about, and in your book, you talk about the application-centric quagmire, which is like, let's understand how did we get into this? Like, why didn't we start into this simple model? Like, where are we right now? What is the big mess that basically, I guess, every single company in the world is in? Well, at least the legacy ones for sure.
So we planted a lot of microphones, secret microphones in boardrooms and recorded conversations over dozens of, no, we didn't really do that. But if we had done that, here's what we would have found. There's a factory at the heart of every enterprise that creates data silos. There's not a thing on the door that says, here's the data silo division of Acme industry, but here's how you build a data silo. First, you say, we have a business problem. Then you form a committee to solve your business problem. And then the committee meets for a while and they decide, oh, it's actually an information problem, which is about half the time. Whatever business problem, it's an information problem. They form another committee and then they sit down, how are we going to solve this problem? And they used to think they had 2 choices. Now they think they have 3 choices, but it's kind of Hobson's choice. It's not a real choice. They're deciding, are we going to build something? Are we going to buy something? Or these days, are we going to rent something? Software as a service. Are we going to rent a solution? And the reason why none of the 3 answers make any difference because whatever choice you pick, you get yet another data model. If you go buy a package, it's got a data model. You go build a system, it's got a data model. You go rent something as SaaS out on the cloud, it's got a data model. And that data model has no connection, no similarity to the other 5,000 data models you have. So now you have 5,001. And that's it. That's how you get there. You get there one silo at a time.
You see, I think that's fascinating because obviously it's such the mode of operation right now, right? In fact, it feels practical, right? It feels like we're business problem focused. We're outcome focused, right?
Yeah. In fact, if you're agile, you can build silos even faster. Waterfall slowed down the creation of silos. It took you quite a while to build a silo in waterfall. Now with the agile,
so are we saying that being agile is correlated with the silos?
Oh yeah.
So to be data-centric, you can't be agile?
No, you can be agile, but most agile, Jan Zosman, he had this great saying in one of his presentations recently. He says, you go watch an agile developer work, and they're going to spend about one neuron thinking about how is what I'm doing connected to the rest of the enterprise. It's not that agile can't work. In fact, I think you should build data-centric agilely, but your average agile person is just going to solve the problem immediately in front of them. And they're going to build the least amount of data structure they need to solve that problem. And that's another silo.
This goes into, I think I brought this up in past episode, is this balance between being efficient and resilient, right? Yep. So we think about solving problems in an efficient way, which usually that's kind of correlated to short term. Like I can go buy this thing here, do this quick, I'm done, right? The problem solved. Yep. But hey, how is that going to affect or impact this other system that they're doing right now in parallel, or they're going to go do tomorrow, which we have no idea. And then we just keep doing this. So we don't plan for being resilient. But what is that balance, right? Is there a balance we can do, or we're always?
Do you have to lose efficiency to become anti-fragile, or whatever phrase you want to use there, right?
Yeah, in a way, the agile guys are almost shining a light on it. They have this idea they call technical debt, and to them, what technical debt is, if in this sprint I do a hack just because I had to get something done for the sprint, I tally one up for technical debt because I know I got to go back and refactor that later. But that's technical debt in their lane. If they lifted their heads up a little bit and looked out a little, they would say, what I'm really doing here is integration debt. Every time I create a new data structure, I've created integration debt because somebody is eventually going to have to come back and integrate it back with all the other stuff. Not me, but I've just created a problem for somebody else.
Okay, this is key, and I think that this is the first time I'm thinking about this together. The technical debt and realizing it's really integration debt. Usually that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
I bring this saying like, okay, I can do this fast because hey, I'm getting this requirement, we need to get it done, but I should have done it this way because of this, because I need to connect eventually to this other system, but that's not a priority right now, right? My customer is not asking for that right now, so let me get this thing done, and then we just call it debt. It just goes into the list of things that we will one day get to, but we lose it.
Yeah. So you've got this integration or technical debt. You've got proliferation of data models. What other big problems come out of the application-centric approach?
And this is just a coincidence of what's happened, but there tends to be, and it's partly because it's code and not model driven, a lot of dependency on the existing infrastructure and all kinds of things like that. So, a lot of the application quagmire leads you into applications that will eventually become technologically obsolete. About half the time when somebody has to go replace a ERP system or any of these things, it's because, we no longer support database. Database? How did you get on database? Or stuff like that. You just go, Power Builder, what?
The short term over the long term.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so we enter into this quagmire because on day one we bought one application, and then on day two we built another application, and we start buying applications to go solve problems, but we never think about how this application needs to go connect to something else.
Yep.
So if we were thinking about the connection of this stuff, you would say, oh, if I go buy another application, I'm just adding more silos. So you actually think about it and saying, okay, is there some way to put this all together in a better way, which would be a single model about that?
Yeah.
So why don't people get this? I mean, we're having a very logical conversation. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but what do people's like? I don't care. I'm fine with the status quo. I mean, maybe it's like, oh, our company's gonna get acquired in 5 years, whatever. It's like, it's gonna be somebody else's problem. I'm just trying to be efficient for the first 5 years or whatever. I mean, why don't people get this?
Well, let's start, follow the money. There's several large industries that don't want to hear this message. The systems integration industry definitely does not want to hear this. They're making money. The faster you can build silos, the more work for system integrators, right? That's a big industry. The application software industry is another one that doesn't want to hear this message, because every application is another silo. They don't want to say, oh, gee, if you just have one model and little bits of lightweight functionality on it, who's going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for that? You go, yeah, who is going to pay? That's stupid. So there's just a lot of inertia and perverse incentives and all kinds of reasons not to do this. In fact, I think what it's going to take is for the customers, the businesses, to retake their own destiny. I think they've been led along by vendors and system integrators for too long.
So you don't see an easy path where the systems integrators and the vendors are the ones taking companies to the promised land. You see it as being a revolution from within.
Absolutely. The incentives are too, if you can do these things for, an initial couple of projects for a few million instead of 100 million, the system integrator realizes, God, I'd have to sell 100 of those projects to make the same margin I've got off one ERP implementation. Why would I do that?
Well, this is an interesting point. And John brings up a good question here. How much does human exceptionalism play into data model propagation? I.e., every special case needs to be handled, right? This happens all the time. It's like, oh, I'm really complex, or my data is big. No, my data is bigger, right?
Yeah,
but my situation is it's more. I can't. It's impossible to have a single model because my scenario is too complex. How much of that is true? How much of that is just pure BS?
It's mostly BS. We haven't seen, I've yet to see an enterprise that's fundamentally really complex. You go in fact, every once in a while, I get involved with these guys who are going to join a consortium to solve the heat exchanger problem. And this was like $1 billion consortium. Everybody was going to be in on it, Microsoft and Google, but Emerson and people who build heat exchangers. And I'm just going, $1 billion. God, this must be way more complex than we thought. But anyhow, we finally get the opportunity to go in and build a prototype of a heat exchanger knowledge graph and loaded all their data in it, from the drawings and the plans and the IoT and everything else. And we looked at it and go, yeah, actually, that wasn't very complicated. Why did you guys think this was complicated?
I love, so in the book, I think at the end of chapter 1, you say, by the way, if you make your living selling or implementing these bloated systems, you should probably just throw this book down now.
Yep.
Nobody wants to hear the reality of this stuff. Well, all right, we're being a bit kind of negative and bleak about everything. Let's figure out, let's turn this a little bit more positive here. How should we start? And I want to think about this from a technology, we already talked about technology, right? You said knowledge graphs, use semantics wisely, model driven everything. Let's talk about from the people side, because you said this is not something you go buy, right? Gartner's not going to hype this up. So from a people perspective and processes, how do you see this?
What we've seen the most successful, most of the people who get this initially, unfortunately, are in the IT department. They see what's going on. They see the problem, but they can't get any traction in the IT department. And so they have to leave the IT department, which is easier these days than it's ever been. Because right now, everybody's doing digital transformation. Well, digital transformation is just a catchphrase for the business retaking over part of the IT budget, which is okay. That's actually a good thing. If you're in IT, go find your digital transformation champion.
So wait, let's repeat that. A digital transformation is just another way of the business people taking over the IT budget?
Yeah.
I love that definition. That's an honest, no BS definition for digital transformation.
BS.
That's no BS right there.
Yep. Yep. And it's true. Everywhere I see it, that's exactly what, and that's a good thing.
So it's the chief data office, or it's the application team, or it's the line of business, or it's some other part of the organization that is driving this disruption. Sometimes with IT's approval, and oftentimes without it, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes they're leading IT, and sometimes they're just ignoring them. And it works either way, actually. You mentioned the chief data officer. Sometimes it's the chief data officer, but God, I get the impression, just flicking around from client to client, that about 80% of chief data officers are more concerned about data governance than they are about actually making progress. And data governance is good.
This is what we talk about. Like they're focused on, the risk. Let's make sure people don't access the data.
Defense.
The defense, and a lot of we got to be offensive about this. What we always say is like, why are the brakes in your car? They're not to go slow. They're to enable you to go fast safely. Like, we got to think about it that way.
Yep. Yeah. So although some of the CDOs get it and want to lead the charge, but you're more likely to find that all these people have, like, somebody I just talked to today was, they were in charge. They're the vice president of the digital marketing platform. Everybody always asks when you go marketing, what title are you looking for? God, some of these titles are so made up. But that's a good one. Vice president of marketing digital platform, or digital.
It actually kind of sounds like a fun job. I think I might like that job.
It is kind of a cool job, because this guy has 100 people working for him, half of whom are developers and the other half are marketers. I mean, I think that'd be very cool.
Is that a key aspect of what drives success with a data-centric approach? I know, Juan, you talk a lot about the knowledge scientist, the knowledge engineer, really marrying technical and domain expertise together. Is that a key ingredient here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it can succeed by being launched out of IT, but statistically, it seems more likely to be successful not launched out of IT.
So how do we prepare organizations to think about this? And I'm also thinking it's like, we have to go higher, right? We have to go set up new teams. Org structures need to change. I mean, the head of talent needs to be involved on how to bring in, who are these new types of roles? Like, are we actually, I personally think we're starting to see this with the kind of the rise of the data product manager and people thinking about treating data as a product. I think we're going in the right direction.
Right.
Is that it? Are we on the right direction? Let's just keep going, or is there something that we're missing?
No, I think that's right. I think the other thing, though, instead of redoing the whole organization, all this kind of stuff, this stuff is still abstract enough that it's hard to sell. And I'm sure you've noticed that. But if you can get a beachhead, if you can do not a proof of concept, but a real pilot, if you can actually get real data in a real knowledge graph, and people can see what it is, that's when the light goes on. Up to that point, it sounds so abstract that only a few thought leaders are really going to get where it's going. But once they see it, they go, oh, and now all of a sudden somebody has to be in charge of it. And then they all start scrambling.
All right, but what are they actually seeing?
Just, typically, well, we say, we have this organizing principle we call competency questions. So if you can express a question that currently has people going off into multiple different systems and building spreadsheets and doing analysis and coming back with the answer 2 or 3 days from now. If you can express that as a question and then say, gee, if you harmonize all this data in the data-centric knowledge graph and you just run a query, you get your answer. Maybe you see it as a graphic, maybe you see it as a table. It doesn't really make that much difference which way you see it. The issue is they have to see questions being answered that were previously difficult to answer.
Yeah, so I always talk about this as there's two, I like to frame there's two aspects. One is, what are things that you cannot do today that you would like to get done, right?
Yep.
What are those questions? And then another one is, what are those questions that are really important questions that are just too painful to answer because it just takes too much time, it takes too much effort, and like all that stuff. So what are those? And I think what we want to go do is we basically say, we can do better.
Yeah.
What we do better is, well, you couldn't do it. So if I can do it, that already is better. And then if you already know these important questions that take too much time, money, effort, whatever, you have a baseline there. Then you say, let's go place a bet. I'm going to bet you that I can do this better. And by better, I have already metrics to go quantify this.
Yep.
Let me go at it. And I think we should just literally kind of place bets on this stuff and saying, if I do better, I win. And let's do it again. If you don't believe me, we'll do it again. At some point, you're like, okay, shoot, this is the way to go do it. I think that's the way how we have to get people to go challenge and I don't know, let's just start placing bets about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Make it about the ROI, right? In that case, it seems like the return on investment here is, you're getting to insights faster, in some cases immediately, and more productive, able to bridge together more pieces of context. Seems like the ROI here is pretty clear to articulate, right? If you actually choose to do so. Yeah.
The tricky bit is if you lean too hard into ROI, you get back to being too agile and just solving the immediate problem and forget. So there is a balancing act. You say, how can I get the ROI and still be future proof?
Don't just think about the next 2 weeks or the next quarter.
Right.
Think bigger, right?
Right. Yep.
All right. So I told Dave 30 minutes fly by, right? This is what there's still a couple more things I want to get by. How do we, so two things I want. How do you, somebody who gets it inside an organization and they're just around people who are just negative Nancy's, like, what is your suggestion about how to help them change? And my immediate answer is, you force people, they can't force them. We send them these books. I have spent a lot of my own personal money buying these books, just sending it out to people because this is just, for me, the way they get it. But
I got my books from Juan.
No, but how do you convince? What are the tools you give people to go convince others about this, to be part of this revolution?
Yeah, well, the book's a good one.
Go buy the book.
You just have to find somebody who's willing to, like you say, to make a bet. Somebody, because in the absence of that, it's just business as usual. So
you just need to go find a fellow comrade,
a sponsor. Typically it's somebody with more budget than you have.
And then let's say you have the budget. How do you actually start?
Well, we have a methodology. We call it think big, start small. And the way we got to that, we used to only think big. We used to just do enterprise ontologies and give them to people and think that we had done them a real favor. And then they just put them on the shelf, which really pissed us off. And then we noticed, everybody's agile. They just start small, but we realized they're creating semantic silos. So we said, no, you have to actually do both of those together at the same time. You have to do enough of the enterprise ontology such that your first experiment is going to seamlessly integrate into the future. So that's the trick. You have to put that scope together. It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be big enough to do that, or else you're just in a cul-de-sac.
What I always say, right? Don't boil the ocean. Start small.
Right.
Well,
we're going to boil this mud puddle here.
I think, that's for sure. But and then again, we want to be able to go tie everything to a success criteria, but I think you'd want to have that vision of, okay, this is successful. There's something that's going to build upon this and keep going later.
Yeah. Don't think so small that it doesn't create impact, right?
Yeah,
It has to be, the impact has to be big and part of a larger roadmap.
Yep, exactly.
Well, I think there's a lot of food for thought here. I think we really, this is something that, again, I truly want people to understand the problem, right? I think if we don't really value the situation we're in, because we don't really understand this problem. And I think that's why, I'm truly genuinely a big Dave fanboy for the book, because I'm looking here at a quote from one of my colleagues, Will, who said, "Software Wasteland made me realize that we, as in everyone in the enterprise software industry, is doing everything wrong." And that's because we buy an application, and so forth. So I think this is my message to everybody who's listening here. Please read Software Wasteland to really understand what the problem is. If you don't understand what the problem is, we won't even understand why we need all these solutions that are coming out. And we'll just, at the end of the day, we're just going to go reinvent the wheel and keep expanding this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we always like to wrap up with our takeaways. Tim takes away our takeaways.
Taking away. There's a lot here that's really exciting. And first of all, really appreciate your time, Dave, today. I think one of the biggest things that really stood out to me is the fact that you're talking about building some traction and showing it, and then really tying it to the value that can really have an impact on the organization. And I think that your phrase that you kind of ended up here with, that's, think big, start small, that fits a lot with what we've been talking about on this show, and what you obviously and the folks you work with are seeing that is successful. You have to have a big vision of how you want to make change, and then you want to deliver against that change in smart and agile ways, but don't use agile as an excuse to do small things. So I think exactly. that sounds great.
Right on.
Yeah. I got so many takeaways here. One is data-centric, no honest, no BS, simple, single, extensible data model.
Yep.
That instead of all the hundreds of data models we have in there, it's not a technology. You can't buy it. It requires discipline. The whole technical depth thing, right? I think we talk about technical depth is within an application, but hey, our applications don't live by themselves. They talk to other applications. So we really have a lot of integration debt, and we really need to acknowledge that and make sure we address that. I love the honest, no BS definition of digital transformation. It's just business taking the budget away from IT. Love that. This was such a fantastic conversation, Dave. Always two final questions. One, what's your advice? Very broad question about anything. And second, who should we invite next to the show?
Let's see, advice. We put out an ad once a long time ago. We were looking for developers in this enterprise we were in, and we said something about joining our plan to take over the world. And one of the respondents writes back and says, if you're looking for taking over the world, my advice is don't invade Russia in the winter. So that's my first piece of advice. Don't invade Russia in the winter. In terms of people to invite, have you had Jans Osman on the show yet?
We haven't, Jans? But Jans, if you're listening, we're going to send you this. You're going to be on the show for sure. Love it.
Yep. He's always got interesting things to say. Do you know Parsa Mahaji at Montefiore?
I do know Parsa, yeah.
Yeah, I think he'd be a good one.
Okay, excellent. Love this.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Now they're on a roll there?
We just did a little partnership with this firm called Visual Meaning, and the head guy is named Steve Whitla, and they have created this way to make visually, artistically beautiful. At first they just look like infographics. Then you start drilling into them, and there's an ontology, and it gets smarter, and it's like zooming in a Google Earth, that the resolution changes, and all of a sudden there's more information and all this. Is really, I've never seen anything like it. It's kind of fantastic.
That sounds awesome. We
All
got to
right.
find an example of that and drop it in the Slack channel. We got a little community.
Yeah,
Slack now.
you know, their website isn't very good, frankly. He's presented several things that aren't on his website, but it's, you know, you can look at the website. It's visual meaning.
All right. Well, to wrap up, thanks, Dave, again. And just a quick reminders, don't forget the Knowledge Graph Conference. You can get your tickets at knowledgegraph.tech. Special 10% discount with the code CCKGC. The early bird closes next Monday, and we're going to have a special edition of Catalog and Cocktails over there. And next week, we're going to be talking about data science and education with Professor George Fletcher from the Technical University of Eindhoven, where we're going to be talking a lot about what's next for education and data science. And I think a lot of this knowledge science and knowledge work topic is going to come up. Dave, thank you so much for enlightening us on this on this path to the data-centric revolution. And everybody, go get your books, Software Wasteland and the Data-Centric Revolution.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Tim. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Dave.